So this video is meant to show you what a Boeing tour would look like. You've been on a ride along, you've seen what the tour looks like from the guest perspective, and this is essentially what we've called the dry run, and kind of walking you through what the logistics of the Boeing tour. The biggest challenge with the Boeing tour is the logistics, the managing of the people and communicating what's happening, going up there and getting them into the future of flight and getting their tickets and all that, having it make sense for them and communicating when they're going to be back. And the narration portion, the part where you're talking about Bill Boeing and the history of the Boeing company, is not as critical. So this video, we wanted to focus on kind of the logistics and some of the pointers and that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to cover. Okay, welcome to the Boeing tour. My name is Brian and I am your tour guide. I will be taking you up to the Boeing factory. You want to go to the Boeing factory, right? Good, because that's where we're headed. And so we're going to be heading up to the city of Everett. That is about 30 miles or 50 kilometers north of here. And we'll be leaving here very shortly. We should be getting up there probably about 35-40 minutes. It takes about 35-40 minutes to get there on I-5. I'll show you on a map real quickly where we are and where we're going, but that's where we're headed. We're going to be going up to the visitor center where I will be handing you over to the Boeing people. I cannot take you into the factory. So when we get up there at 10:30, I will be handing you over to the people up there. The Boeing tour guide will take you into and through the factory. And I'll kind of explain how that's all going to work once we get up there. You're going to be in the factory for about an hour and a half, and you'll be seeing the production of the 747s, the 777s, the 787 Dreamliners, and it's quite an experience, as I'm sure you know. And we'll be then spending a little time in the visitor center. There's things to see there before we head on back to Seattle. We'll be getting back downtown here probably around 1:30, 2 o'clock, something like that, and I'll get you back to your hotel. Or if you want to be dropped off somewhere other than your hotel, we can do that. So Space Needle, Pike Place Market, something like that, if you want to be dropped off somewhere else downtown Seattle. So that's the plan. The cost of the tour is $94, and we can take care of that later with credit card or cash, and we'll worry about that later, if I remember. If I forget, you get a free tour. Welcome to the Boeing tour. My name is Brian and I'm your tour guide. We're going to be heading to the Boeing factory, and that is in the city of Everett, which is north of here, about 30 miles, 50 kilometers. We're going to be heading up there. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what we're going to be doing and explaining how this will work when we get up to the factory. Also telling you about some of the things we're seeing and telling you about a little bit about the history of the Boeing company. It's going to take us about 35 or 40 minutes to get up there. And we need to get rolling because we need to be up there before 10:30. That is when your tour begins, and I will be handing you over to a Boeing tour guide that will be taking you through the factory. So we're going to hit the road. I'll be telling you a little bit more about some of the things that will be happening when we get up there as we go. You have any questions, real quick? If you have questions as we go, feel free to ask, and we'll start rolling. Sound good? All right, here we go. So what I wanted to talk about with you, the future potential Boeing tour guide, is what do you talk about when you're leaving the hotel and you're not yet to I-5. You're driving from the Westin to I-5. What do you talk about? Well, I talk about just what we're doing or what we're seeing. We're going to turn left here. We're heading over to Interstate 5, which is where we'll be heading north. This is the monorail tracks right up here. This is these elevated tracks for the monorail train that runs between Westlake Center here and the Space Needle, which you will see in a moment. This is the area we call the retail core. It's Nordstrom and department store, a couple of other department stores and shopping centers and shopping malls and clothing stores and that sort of thing. Pike Street, Pine Street are right over here. Of course, Pike Street going right down into the Pike Place Market, very close to the retail core. We are heading east right now, and Interstate 5 is right up here. Get some glimpses of the Space Needle off to your left in a moment. One of the things you'll notice as I talk about what we're seeing, cranes, construction, talk about the growth in Seattle and all of the construction and what is happening. More construction cranes than any other city in the United States. 65 construction cranes at last count. It's also helpful to have just some general information in your back pocket. You can talk about population numbers, population of Seattle, population of the Seattle metropolitan area, how many people have been moving here, how many people work for Amazon and some of the other big companies, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, you're at I-5. This is I-5 underneath us. We're going to be getting on to northbound Interstate 5 here, and as we do, you will see the Space Needle on your left. There's the Space Needle. Some of you are up there. The view. I'll tell you more about that later on our way back. It's one of the things you could do this afternoon and this evening is you can go up to the top of the Space Needle. And in just a moment, you'll be starting to see some water on the left. This is Lake Union, which I mentioned as I was pointing out on the map. Very significant piece of the history of Boeing is this is the lake where the Boeing company started back in 1916. I'll tell you a little bit more about that and how that all came about. There's Lake Union. Lake Union locally is known for its floating homes. Lake Union has floating houses, which you might be able to see a few of them down there on the edge of the lake. There are over 500 floating houses in this area. Very popular places to live. You'll also start to see on the left, just a moment here, the Olympic Mountains coming into view. It's that mountain range you see over there to the left. To the east, we have the Cascade Mountain Range, which you'll see in just a moment. Off to your right, you can now see the Cascade Mountain Range to the east. You can also see a little bit of Lake Washington out there, the big freshwater lake to the east of Seattle. You can see just a tiny bit of it there. A little bit of the floating bridge that goes across the lake there. This area to our immediate right is what we call the University District, the campus of the University of Washington. So just to emphasize the importance of paying attention to the time with the Boeing tour and getting started and rolling as quickly as possible. You just never know what sort of traffic you're going to encounter heading up to Boeing. And you might think, oh, I checked the traffic and I looked at Google Maps and it was all wide open and green, and you get up here and it's, look at this. And this is in the morning. This is just almost stop and go traffic in the morning, and it can be very nerve-wracking if you are trying to get to the Boeing tour by whatever time, 10:30 or the 1 o'clock tour, and you're stuck in traffic. Look at this, coming to a complete stop. So one of the concerns is if you get up there to the future of flight, the visitor center, with only a couple minutes to spare, how are you going to handle that? You do not want that to happen. You want to avoid that at all costs. And heavy traffic could add 10, 15 minutes to your time, your travel time. You need to be cognizant of that. So every guide does their narration a little differently, and what I do is using that the principle that you want to talk about what you're seeing. I talk a little bit about I-5, and this is the freeway that we're on, north-south interstate connecting Canada with Mexico. We're seeing a bunch of trees on either side of the road, and Douglas fir trees, and I use those to lead into talking about the timber industry, the logging industry, and how it all kind of got started, or how Seattle got started. I'll point out the trees and say these are Douglas fir trees on either side of the road, these tall, thin trees with pointy tops. And this region used to be covered with millions of evergreen trees. This is old growth evergreen forest, this whole region. And how that relates to the Boeing Company is the logging. Seattle started as a logging and timber town. So all these cities and towns started as logging settlements, timber towns, and a lot of people moved out here to work in the timber business, including Bill Boeing. Bill Boeing ended up coming out here in 1903 to work in that timber business. All right, we are about to exit Interstate 5 at exit 189. We were driving in the HOV lane, and if you're in the HOV lane driving up to Boeing, make sure you give yourself enough time to start getting over, because it can be difficult to get over 3 lanes. And when you pass about exit 186, you want to start getting over. Give yourself a few miles to get over through the traffic. And then when you come up on the exit 189, you'll drive right under the part of the sign that says Island Ferry. These different lanes will open up, but it says Mukilteo Whidbey Island Ferry, and there's an arrow pointing to this lane. It's the second lane over from the right. You don't want to be in the right lane, because that's the exit over to the mall. And make sure you do not miss this exit, because if you do, you're going to go all the way up to downtown Everett, and it's going to add a lot of time to your tour and maybe make you late getting people into the factory. So pay very close attention to the road sign, the signs and the exits and all that. Stay in the lane you were in. And as you come off the freeway, be thinking, on a clear day, your guests are going to get an incredible view off to the right of the Cascade Mountains as you fly up and over Interstate 5. Suddenly, this tremendous view of the Cascades comes into view, and off at Mount Baker. Today is very hazy because of a lot of smoke in the air, but many days they can take really good view of Mount Baker, and you can point out that's an active volcano. It's up near the border with Canada. And again, you might narrate what's happening. We're leaving Interstate 5. We're heading west. So you might tell the guests, we're heading west on the Boeing freeway, or coming up to the factory. It is a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes driving on the Boeing freeway before you get to the factory, but you do want to set that up as you come up to it. So from the time you leave Interstate 5 until you get to the factory, it's probably 3 minutes, something like that, maybe 4 minutes. But you want to try to sort of lead into it or set it up, and you want to give your guests some notice that it's coming up. I'm not going to tell you all about the statistics of this building, because they will be telling you all about it during the tour. The size of these doors inside those big doors are the production lines that you will be visiting. You'll see completed aircraft out here. One thing you want to do as a tour guide is explain what is going on here, because we're driving past the factory. So you want to explain what's happening. We're driving past the factory and we are approaching the visitor center up here. We're driving around the north end of a runway called Payne Field. You'll see the runway on your left here in just a moment. You'll see a bunch of aircraft lined up next to the runway. Those are completed airplanes. There you can see the flight line, all the completed 787s and 777s, and some 767s and 747s. We're going to stop here, this parking lot on the other side of this Hilton Garden. We'll park and I will walk you in to the visitor center. The visitor center is called the Future of Flight, and there is a gallery, an exhibit area in there that talks all about the future of flight, future technology, and
looks like a Dreamlifter's there as well today.
And one thing you'll notice as you're driving in is whether or not a Dreamlifter is here. And if a Dreamlifter is here, it's an exciting bonus that the guests will be able to see from the roof, the rooftop observation deck of the visitor center. So you can talk a little bit about what's happening here as we're turning the corner here to the left to the visitor center. We'll park. We're going to get off of the bus here when we park, and I'll walk you inside and I will show you where things are, the restrooms and the lockers, the movie theater, which I told you is where at 10:30 you need to be, because that is where the tour begins. So this is the visitor center. You'll see the front entrance here. And we'll park, we'll walk inside, we'll show you around. I pointed out Mount Baker. We can also see Mount Rainier down here today. Sometimes you can see it. Today we can't, but if you can, it's visible here from here. You can see all the aircraft lined up here. We'll park here and we'll get off the bus, and if you want to leave anything on the bus, you can, but I would not recommend leaving valuables. You can take photos and use phones and electronics inside the visitor center here. So you can take all that stuff in with you. Make sure you stop here with your door not opening into the trees, bushes. Okay, before anybody gets up and out of your seats, let me explain here what's going on. We're going to get off the bus here. We're going to gather right here, and I'm going to lock up the bus, and I'm going to walk you inside. So, like I said, if you want to leave any jackets or whatever you don't need with you, we're not going to be outdoors more than just walking between the building and the bus and the building. So if you want to leave your umbrellas and your jackets and whatever. But take your valuables inside. I'll show you where the lockers are, the free lockers. I'll show you where the restrooms are, get your tickets to get you into the theater for the factory tour. Any questions? All right, let's get off the bus. As you're walking to the building, you want to kind of be engaging with your group, and you want to be keeping track of them, but they're going to kind of be spreading out as you go. But the idea is you want to be with the group, and then you want to be the first one in to the visitor center. So we're going to gather right inside here to the right. Welcome to the visitor center. The blue hallway over here is where you need to be in 14 minutes at 10:30. They're going to open up the theater a little bit early, and so you'll want to be in there before 10:30. That's where your tour will start. I'm going to get your tickets. You need a ticket to get in there. In the meantime, there are lockers, blue, red, gray lockers that are all the same. They're free, and you can put your things in the locker. I can help you out with how those work. The restrooms are under the sign that says Future of Flight. You want to use the restrooms before you go into the theater, as when you're over in the factory for that hour and a half, there will be no restrooms available. So let me get your tickets, and I'll let you loose. If there's a line at the ticket counter, you don't need to stand in line. You can just bypass the line. They'll see your yellow, tell them your tour is Northwest, and they'll get you. And they should have your tickets waiting for you. You want to get your tickets and count them out, and then you can hand them out to your guests. So the lockers, if they're in the upright, the little keyhole is in the upright or vertical position, it's open. You can just pull it open. You can latch it, and you can still reopen it. How you set your code is you do it before you latch it. You'll set your code. I'm just going to do 0000 ZZZZ, and now I'm going to latch it, and I'm going to scramble the numbers. Now my code to get back in is 0000, and I'm back in. Every time you do that, you need to reset the code. But you try to make it something easy to remember, and that's how simple it is. So before you leave the Future of Flight, there are a few things you want to take care of. One is you want to do a head count. You want to make sure you have the right number of people before you leave the Visitor Center, Future of Flight, to head back into Seattle. You don't want to leave anyone behind. Second of all, you want to make sure you know where you're going when you get downtown. If people want to be dropped off somewhere other than their hotel, you can't just assume you're going to all the hotels that you picked up. People might want to be dropped off at the Space Needle or somewhere other than their hotel. That will also allow you to determine if you need shuttle help. If you need help, if there's a shuttler available, you can talk to dispatch and get help with your drop-offs. So as people are getting back on the bus, find out where they want to be dropped off. And lastly, to determine your best route back into downtown, you want to be looking at the traffic, using Google Maps, or talking to dispatch and find out if there are any issues and before you head back. Okay, we're going to head back into Seattle, and I want to make sure I have everybody back on board here. Okay, and we've got all 17 of you back on board. And I was asking about where you wanted to be dropped off. I'll get you back to your hotels or the Space Needle or the Pike Place Market. And if you change your mind, just let me know as we go. I can make accommodations, but we'll head back into downtown and get you to your final destination. Any questions as we go? All right, let's hit the road. So we are back in Seattle. Interstate 5, we're going to be leaving in just a moment, and up ahead is where the traffic comes to a grinding halt. Almost every single day, the same place at Northgate. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a little cheat. I don't know if it's a cheat or not, but you can get off here at Northgate Way. And what you don't want to do is get off at Northgate Way and go west. You're going to get into some terrible lights and streets that it's going to take forever. But you stay on the ramp here to the left, and you're bypassing all of the traffic that's not really moving on Interstate 5. And you're back on Interstate 5 up here, the on-ramp. That saves a few minutes, maybe saves a few seconds. But your exit, this is Northgate Mall to our left, and the exit is just past Northgate Mall, and it says 85th and 80th. We're going to take 80th. Do not take 85th. 85th is narrow and there's lights. Well, there's lights on 80th also, but 80th is a lot safer. But what I tell the guests is we're going to be leaving Interstate 5 in just a moment here to avoid this traffic into downtown Seattle. And if you haven't already talked about traffic and the growth in this area, you can talk a little bit about that and how Seattle has been the fastest growing major U.S. city and blah, blah, blah. But I tell people what's happening. We're going to be leaving Interstate 5. We're going to go through a neighborhood called Green Lake, which is a typical Seattle neighborhood. So you will get to see, and I'm just kind of selling whatever you're doing, going through the Green Lake neighborhood. We're going to see a typical Seattle neighborhood. You get to see some houses, and I'll point out a few places and give you an idea of what real estate prices are like in the Seattle area. You'll see the little lake that gives the neighborhood its name, Green Lake. We're passing the 85th exit there, staying to the left, the off-ramp. You don't want to take 85th. Stay to the left, and we're going to take 80th. But this is also where I start talking about some of the things people can do this afternoon, this evening in Seattle. And I had promised it earlier. If you promise it to the guests, you tell them you're going to be talking about something later. You want to remember to talk about it. Don't forget to talk about it later. So when I get off Interstate 5, or even before I get off Interstate 5, I'm talking about some of the things people could do. And I have just a little spiel that I give. It's almost always the same about the ferries. Take the ferry from downtown Seattle over to Bremerton or Bainbridge Island. Usually recommending Bainbridge Island. Next door to the ferry terminal is Ivar's. You can go there. It's my favorite seafood restaurant in Seattle. There's all sorts of things down at the waterfront there. Talk about that, or whatever you want to talk about. Downtown Seattle waterfront. Pioneer Square is right near there. People could do the underground tour. Of course, that depends on what time you're getting back into town. If the only time they have is this evening, they might not have time to do the underground tour, but you might talk about Pioneer Square and the underground. You could talk about the Pike Place Market. You could talk about a few blocks away from there is the monorail. They could take the monorail up to the Space Needle. You could talk about the Space Needle observation deck, the Chihuly Garden and Glass, Mopop. You could talk about all these things, telling people what their options are this evening. Again, Mopop is one of those things that might be closed. I'm going to go straight here on 80th. You can turn left one of these streets like Wallingford to go one block to the left down to the north end of Green Lake and drive alongside the lake, which some guides do, Lucinda does, to show the guests the lake. But I'm just going to stay on 80th and go directly west to Highway 99. We're going to turn left on Highway 99, and that'll take us right back into downtown. Easy access to the hotels around the Space Needle and the Space Needle itself. So we are on the Aurora Bridge on taking Highway 99 southbound and I'm in the middle lane, you do not want to drive in the left lane on this bridge. These lanes are very narrow. You look down here, you see the little jet skiing down there, the canal. The guests can see the canal right about here. They also see the Olympic Mountains to the west, to the right, and the Cascade Mountains to the east, to the left. They can hardly see Lake Union. So when we talk about Lake Union, it's not that visible from here. If you come back into downtown on I-5, Lake Union is much more visible. And then if this is backed up, on 99, once you get across the Aurora Bridge, there's a bus lane, and this usually moves fairly well. And you can stay in this lane all the way down till you get off at Valley or Aloha or Roy, or you can even continue down to exit at Harrison or John.